It's not a priority right now. 5 words. That's what she said when I walked into her office for the third time in 6 weeks. The woman from HR didn't even lift her head. She kept writing something, pen moving in tiny circles, while I stood there explaining how my manager had been stealing my wages for 8 months. 47 hours one week, 52 the next, 54 the week after that. Every single hour beyond 40 went unpaid, because one morning I woke up and discovered I was suddenly salaried exempt, even though I was still doing the exact same job I'd done for 2 years. Nothing about my work changed, just the paycheck. "We'll look into it eventually," she said, voice flat. I stood there watching her write, feeling something inside me crack. Not break, crack. Like when you drop a glass and it doesn't shatter but you know it's already ruined. You just haven't touched it yet to find out how deep the damage goes. Before we continue further, thank you for being here. If this story sounds familiar, or if you've ever felt invisible at your own workplace, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my position. Your support means everything, and it keeps these stories coming. My name is Lorien, and I need you to understand something about me. I'm not the person who causes trouble. I'm the person who fixes things. I organize shipments. I track inventory numbers. I make sure products arrive where they're supposed to arrive, when they're supposed to arrive. I'm good at details. I notice when things don't add up. When a box says 60 units but contains 58, I catch it. When a delivery schedule shows Tuesday but the actual arrival was Wednesday, I document it. Details matter in my line of work. Details are everything. I started at this company 3 years before all of this happened. Entry level, hourly. Clocking in at 7 in the morning and clocking out at 4 in the afternoon, unless there was a big shipment. And then I'd stay late and get paid time and a half like everyone else. The work was straightforward and honest. I liked the simplicity of it. Count the products, verify the numbers, make sure the distribution centers got what they ordered, go home, sleep, repeat. My manager's name was Bethany when I started. Nice woman. Retired after 30 years with the company. Gave me a coffee mug on my first day that said, "Counting on you," with a smiley face. She taught me the systems, showed me which suppliers were reliable and which ones always shorted their shipments by 2% and hoped nobody would notice. I noticed. When Bethany retired, they brought in someone new. Her name was Cecile, 31 years old, sharp suits, hair always pulled back so tight it looked painful. She'd worked at 3 other companies in 5 years, moving up each time. Everyone in management talked about how impressive she was, how ambitious, how she always exceeded her targets. What they meant was she knew how to make numbers look good on paper. Cecile smiled constantly, not the warm kind of smile that makes you feel welcome. The other kind, the kind that never quite reaches the rest of her face. Like she'd learned to smile from watching videos instead of actually feeling anything. She'd walk through the warehouse smiling at everyone, asking how we were doing, remembering names and birthdays, but her eyes were always doing something else, calculating, measuring, figuring out where she could trim costs. 6 months into her tenure, she called a department meeting. 10 of us gathered in the break room. She stood at the front with a presentation printed out on regular paper, because we didn't have a projector in that building. "I've been reviewing everyone's performance," she said, still smiling, "and I'm excited to announce some promotions." My name was on the list. Senior Inventory Coordinator, salaried position, $52,000 a year. After the meeting, I did the math. I'd been making $48,000 with regular overtime. 52 sounded like a raise until you realized I'd be working the same 50-hour weeks without the extra pay. That was $4,000 more per year for 10 extra hours every week. Roughly $7 per additional hour, less than what I made before. I went to Cecile's office the next day. I had some questions about the salary structure. I said, "Of course." She gestured to the chair across from her. "What's on your mind?" "The hourly breakdown seems lower than what I was earning before with overtime." "Well, you're salaried now. You're not paid by the hour anymore. You're paid for the value you bring." She leaned forward slightly. "This is a step up. More responsibility, more prestige. It shows I trust you with higher-level work." "What higher-level work?" "Strategic inventory management. You'll have more autonomy, more decision-making authority." I counted inventory. That's what I did. That's what I'd been doing. That's what I would continue doing. Nothing about the job description suggested anything strategic or autonomous. I organized boxes and verified numbers. Important work, but not managerial. Can I stay hourly? I asked. Her smile tightened. Lorien, I'm offering you growth here. Don't you want to advance in your career? The way she said it made me feel like I'd asked something ridiculous. Like I'd suggested we set the warehouse on fire instead of count the inventory. I felt my face get warm. I'll think about it. I felt my face get warm. You have until Friday, she said. I need to finalize the paperwork. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours trying to decide if I was being ungrateful or smart. My apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 15-minute drive from work. I'd lived there for 4 years and never once been late on rent. The extra $4,000 per year would be nice, but losing overtime would cost more than I'd gain. Still, Cecile's words kept circling back. Career growth, advancement, trust. On Friday, I accepted the promotion. The first month, I worked 43 hours. Not terrible. The second month, 48. The third month, Cecile started scheduling weekend inventory counts. Mandatory. She'd send a message Friday afternoon saying we needed everyone in Saturday morning because a big shipment was coming Monday and we had to verify space availability. 6 hours on Saturday. No extra pay. You're salaried now, she said when I asked about compensation. This is part of the job. The fourth month, I worked 61 hours in 1 week. 61. I started tracking everything in a notebook I kept at home. Date. Hours worked. Tasks completed. I wrote down every conversation where Cecile implied I might lose my promotion if I didn't show up for weekend counts. Every time she mentioned how other people would love to have my position. Every time she reminded me how much she valued my commitment. I noticed something else during those months. 7 other people in our department had received the same promotion I did. All of us moved from hourly to salaried. All of us working 50, 60-hour weeks now without overtime pay. I started talking to them during breaks. Quiet conversations in the parking lot. Everyone had the same concerns. Everyone felt trapped in the same way. Nobody wanted to complain and risk losing their job. Then one day, someone from accounting mentioned that Cecile had received a huge bonus at the end of the fiscal year. Department costs had dropped by 38% under her management. 38%. I went home and did more math. If 7 people who used to make overtime were now working the same hours for straight salary, that was tens of thousands of dollars in saved labor costs. Money that didn't go to us. Money that went straight to the bottom line. Money that made Cecile look like a genius who knew how to run an efficient operation. That's when I understood. This wasn't about promoting us. This was about reclassifying us to avoid paying overtime. This was wage theft, with a fancy title attached. I spent 3 days reading the Fair Labor Standards Act, the exemption rules, the duties test. To be legally classified as exempt from overtime, you have to meet specific criteria. Your primary duty has to involve management, or you have to exercise discretion and independent judgment about significant business matters. I did none of that. I counted boxes. I checked shipments. I organized inventory. My work was important, but it wasn't exempt work. I scheduled a meeting with HR. The director's name was Paula, 50-something, worked at the company for 20 years. Her office smelled like vanilla air freshener and old paper. I explained the situation, politely, carefully. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I just said I thought there might be a classification error. We'll look into it, Paula said. She wrote something down in a notepad. Our legal team reviews all position classifications. I'm sure everything is in order, but I'll double-check. 2 weeks later, nothing had changed. I was still working 50-hour weeks, still getting the same salary. I scheduled another meeting. This time I brought documentation, printouts of the FLSA guidelines, a list of my actual daily duties, examples of my timesheets showing consistent 50-plus hour weeks. Our lawyers have reviewed all our positions, Paula said. You're correctly classified. The duties you perform qualify for exemption. I count inventory, I said. I don't manage anyone. I don't make business decisions. You exercise judgment in your role. You make determinations about inventory allocation. I follow the system. The computer tells me where products need to go based on existing orders. I just verify the numbers and organize the logistics. That requires professional judgment. She said it like she was reading from a script, like someone had told her exactly what to say if anyone questioned the classifications. I left her office feeling smaller than when I'd entered. 6 weeks later, I went back a third time. This time, I wasn't polite. I wasn't careful. I was exhausted. Cecile had scheduled 3 weekend inventory counts in 1 month. I'd worked 54 hours, then 57, then 62. My body ached. My apartment was a disaster because I was never home long enough to clean it. I'd stopped seeing friends because I was always working or too tired to go anywhere. I'm working 60-hour weeks for the same pay I made 3 years ago, I said. This isn't legal. I know it's not legal. I've read the regulations. I've documented everything. Something needs to change. Paola didn't write anything down this time. She just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Tired, maybe, or annoyed. It's not a priority right now, she said. I walked out of her office and got in my car and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. I wasn't crying. I wanted to cry, but I was too angry. The kind of angry that sits in your chest and makes it hard to breathe properly. The kind that makes you understand why people do things they never thought they'd do. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled up the State Labor Board website. I'd looked at it before but never seriously considered filing a complaint. That felt too big, too confrontational, like dropping a bomb instead of having a conversation. But 3 conversations hadn't worked. 3 meetings, 3 attempts to fix the problem through proper channels, all of them dismissed. The complaint form was long, detailed. It asked for everything: employee information, employer information, description of the violation, supporting documentation. I filled it out slowly, carefully, making sure every single detail was accurate. I listed every hour I'd worked in the past 8 months. I attached my job description. I explained exactly what tasks I performed daily. I included the names of the 7 other employees who'd been reclassified the same way I had. Then I wrote something else, something I'd figured out during my weeks of research. I explained that my manager's bonus structure was directly tied to department cost reduction, that she had a financial incentive to misclassify employees, that her 38% cost savings came from unpaid labor, not efficiency improvements. I submitted the complaint at 2 in the morning. Then I closed my laptop and went to bed. I didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd just made everything better or destroyed my entire career. 4 days passed, 4 days where I showed up to work and counted inventory like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just filed a formal complaint with the state that could blow up everything. I kept waiting for something to happen. A phone call, an email, some kind of acknowledgement that my complaint had been received. Nothing came. I started wondering if I'd done it wrong, if maybe the form hadn't actually submitted, if maybe nobody was ever going to look at it. Then Thursday afternoon, Cecile's assistant came running through the warehouse. Actually running. She never ran. She was always composed, always moving at exactly the right speed to look busy but not frantic. But this time she was sprinting, her shoes making loud sounds against the concrete floor. "Where's Paola?" she shouted to anyone who would listen. "The state is here. They're in the building. They want payroll records for the entire department." I was holding my clipboard, counting a shipment of industrial supplies that had come in that morning, 247 units. I wrote down the number slowly, carefully, like my hand wasn't shaking, like my heart wasn't trying to punch through my ribs. The labor board doesn't call ahead. I'd learned that from my research. They don't schedule appointments or give companies time to prepare. They just show up with legal authority and start auditing. It's the only way to get accurate information. If you tell a company you're coming, they have time to fix things, hide things, reclassify people back to hourly for a few weeks, and then switch them again after the inspection. I kept counting. 248, 249. People were moving differently around me, faster, more urgent. Someone from management walked past, talking quickly into their phone. Another person I'd never seen before was escorting 2 official-looking individuals toward the administrative offices. They carried folders and briefcases and had the kind of expressions that meant they weren't here to be friendly. I finished counting the shipment, verified the manifest, signed off on the delivery. Just another Thursday, just another ordinary task. An hour later, Footsteps approached my workstation. 2 people. I knew, before I turned around, who it would be. Paula stood there with someone else from HR I'd seen before, but never spoken to. Both of them looked like they'd aged several years in the past 60 minutes. Paula's face had lost all its color. The vanilla air freshener smell was gone. Now she just smelled like stress. "Why didn't you tell us you'd contacted the labor board?" Her voice came out strange, higher than normal, tight. I set down my clipboard. "I did tell you, 3 times. You didn't say you were going to file a formal complaint with the state. You said my concerns weren't a priority. I made them a priority." The other HR person stepped forward. "This is a major issue, Lorien. We could have handled this internally. Now we have state investigators requesting documentation for everyone in your department and 3 other departments. Do you understand what kind of position this puts the company in? Do you understand what kind of position you put me in?" I kept my voice level, calm. I worked 60-hour weeks for 8 months without proper compensation. I reported it through the correct internal channels 3 separate times. Nothing changed. What was I supposed to do? Paula's jaw moved like she was chewing something bitter. "We're going to need you to cooperate fully with the investigation." "Of course," I said. "I've already documented everything they'll need." They walked away without saying anything else. I watched them go, watched them disappear back into the administrative wing where the state investigators were probably asking very uncomfortable questions about payroll practices and classification standards, and bonus structures tied to cost reduction. I picked up my clipboard and moved to the next shipment, 312 units of packaging materials. I counted every single one. The investigation took 6 weeks. 6 weeks, where the entire warehouse felt like someone had turned down the volume on everything. People spoke, quieter, moved more carefully. Cecile stopped doing her morning walks through the facility. She stayed in her office with the door shut. Sometimes I'd see her through the window, sitting at her workspace, staring at something I couldn't see. Investigators came back twice more. They interviewed people, pulled time records, requested emails and memos and documentation about position classifications. I was interviewed once for 45 minutes. They asked about my daily tasks, my work hours, whether anyone had ever explicitly told me I couldn't have overtime anymore, whether I'd raised concerns internally before filing the complaint. I told them everything, showed them my notebook with 8 months of detailed time tracking, gave them the dates of my 3 meetings with HR, explained how 7 other people in my department had been reclassified the same way. "Did you notice any pattern to these reclassifications?" one investigator asked. She was maybe 50 years old, with gray hair, cut short, and eyes that looked like they'd heard every excuse in the world. "They all happened within a 6-month period after our new manager started," I said, "and they all reduced department overtime costs significantly." "Did your manager receive any bonuses or compensation tied to department performance?" "Yes. She got a large bonus at year-end. People in accounting talked about it. Department costs had dropped by 38%. The investigator wrote something down. "Thank you. This is helpful." Weeks passed. I kept working, kept counting. The warehouse felt suspended in something heavy and waiting. Then one morning, 6 weeks and 2 days after the state investigators first showed up, an email went out to everyone in my department. "Meeting in the break room at 2 in the afternoon. Attendance mandatory." We gathered at the scheduled time, all 10 of us who'd been reclassified, plus several people from other departments I didn't know well. Management was there. HR was there. Someone from the legal team was there wearing an expression that looked like physical pain. The legal person stood up first. "The State Labor Board has completed their investigation into classification practices. They've determined that certain positions were incorrectly classified as exempt from overtime. This affected multiple employees across several departments." My heart was beating so loud I worried everyone could hear it. "The company is required to pay back wages for all unpaid overtime worked during the period of misclassification. We're also implementing immediate corrective measures to ensure proper classification going forward." She sat down. Paula stood up. "You'll each receive individual notifications about your back pay calculations. The company takes these findings seriously. We're committed to compliance with all labor regulations." Nobody asked questions. Nobody said anything. We all just sat there absorbing what that meant. Back pay. They had to pay us what they'd stolen. The meeting ended. People filed out slowly, quietly. I went back to my workstation and tried to focus on inventory counts, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. 2 days later, an envelope appeared on my workstation. Inside was a letter with numbers, calculations, hours worked, overtime owed. The total made my vision blur for a second. $18,400. That's what they'd stolen from me. Over 8 months. That's what they owed me now. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part came 3 days after that. Cecile was gone. Just gone. Her office empty. Her nameplate removed. Someone mentioned she'd been terminated. Someone else said it was more than termination. The company was demanding she return bonuses. I didn't understand at first. Then someone from accounting explained it to me in the parking lot, speaking quietly like they were sharing classified information. The state investigator had noted something specific in their report. They documented that Cecile's bonus structure was directly connected to department cost savings achieved through misclassifications. The bonuses weren't just rewards for good management. They were financial benefits obtained through illegal labor practices. The company's legal team, trying to protect themselves from liability, had determined that those bonuses could be considered personal enrichment through wage theft. They'd calculated 3 years of bonuses, $127,000. They wanted it back, all of it. Cecile didn't have it. She'd bought a house 2 years ago, a nice house in a good neighborhood, made a down payment that drained most of her savings. She'd been counting on those annual bonuses continuing. She'd built her life around income that came from stolen wages. Now the company wanted their money back, the money they'd given her for stealing from us, and she had to pay it. There were lawyers involved, payment plans, arrangements that would take years to complete. I heard all this fourth-hand through workplace gossip that moved faster than any shipment I'd ever organized. I didn't know if all the details were accurate, but the core truth was undeniable. Cecile was gone. Her bonuses were being reclaimed. She was paying back money she'd already spent. The back paychecks arrived the following week, $18,400. I deposited it the same day. Stood at the bank, watching the teller process the check, watching the numbers appear in my account balance. Money I'd already earned months ago. Money that should have been mine all along. Management brought in someone new to replace Cecile. Her name was Tomasa, late 40s. Calm demeanor. First thing she did was call a department meeting. "I've reviewed all your positions," she said. "Effective immediately. Everyone who is classified as exempt is being reclassified as hourly. You'll track your time. You'll be paid for every hour you work. Overtime will be compensated at the proper rate." Someone asked if we'd still have the senior titles. "You can keep the titles if you want them," Tomasa said. "But titles don't matter as much as fair compensation. You do good work, you should be paid properly for it." That was it. Simple, direct. The way it should have been from the beginning. I went back to counting inventory, back to organizing shipments. But now, when I worked 50 hours, I got paid for 50 hours. When I worked 40, I got paid for 40. The system was simple again, honest again. Paula transferred to a different location 3 weeks later. I never saw her again. Someone told me she requested the transfer. Someone else said management had suggested it. Either way, she was gone. Cecile's office stayed empty for 2 months. They eventually converted it into a storage space for administrative supplies. Sometimes I walk past it and glance through the door. Boxes of paper, filing supplies, extra equipment. No person, no nameplate. Just empty space where someone used to sit and calculate how much money they could save by stealing from the people who worked for them. The other 18 employees who'd been misclassified got their back pay too. Amounts varied. Some had been reclassified longer than I had. Some worked more overtime. The total the company had to pay out was $340,000. $340,000 in stolen wages they had to return because one person finally stopped asking nicely and started demanding legally. I still work there, still count inventory, still organize shipments, still notice when numbers don't add up. My apartment is the same. My commute is the same. But something feels different now. Lighter, like I'm not carrying something heavy that I didn't realize was weighing me down. People ask me sometimes if I was scared to file that complaint, if I worried about retaliation or losing my job. The answer is yes, I was terrified. But I was also tired. Tired of working 60 hours and being paid for 40. Tired of asking for basic fairness and being dismissed. Tired of watching someone profit from my unpaid labor while telling me it wasn't a priority. Sometimes making something a priority means taking it out of someone else's hands and putting it in the hands of people who actually care about fixing it. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt like your concerns didn't matter, like your voice wasn't being heard, I hope this shows you that sometimes the system works, if you know which part of the system to use. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to stay silent. And comment below. Tell me about a time you had to fight for something you deserved. Your stories matter just as much as mine.